G'day groovers, rockers, and in between. This is Vinyl Vibes. I'm your host, Jack Hodgins. Today we are talking with drummer of the Bee Gees, Colin Petersen. Growing up in Kingaroy, Queensland, Australia, Colin was a child actor during the 1950s. He met the Gibb brothers while attending the Humpybong State School and would join the Bee Gees as their drummer in 1967. He remained a member of the Bee Gees till 1969. He is featured on songs such as New York Mining Disaster, Massachusetts, and I Started a Joke. After leaving the Bee Gees in 1969, Colin went on to form the band Humpybong in 1970. Today, Colin tours with the best of the Bee Gees, one of the leading Bee Gee tribute bands. G'day Colin, and welcome to Vinyl Vibes.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Let's start at the beginning, Colin. Now, you grew up for the first 5 years of your life in southern Queensland. Do you remember much of that early stage in your life?
One of the fortunate things I have going for me in these twilight years is that I can remember pretty much everything like it was yesterday. It's fantastic. And I remember way back when I was a little kid, I grew up in Kingaroy, little country town in Queensland. But I was just starting school, so I think it would have been about 5 years old, something like that. We moved down to Margate, which is just north of Brisbane on the coast. My dad bought a little block of flats there, and I was sent off to the Humpybong State School. And it was there that I first picked up the drumsticks and started to play. It was in a marching band, which gives you a lot of discipline, because you've not only got to keep the time and tempo and stuff like that, you've got to bloody march at the same time. And the drum that I was playing was about a quarter of the size of me, so it was no mean feat. And that was the first band, the Fife Marching Band, and that was the first ensemble, so to speak, that I played with, and that was my introduction.
Yeah, and I could imagine having that, doing the drumming in the marching band, that would make you a really disciplined, as you said, disciplined drummer. And
yes, it does, because you're following certain patterns. They've got to be spot on. It's the whole thing about it with the marching and the playing. It did teach discipline. And from that situation, I was introduced to a drum teacher in Brisbane. Now, my very rich, by the way, uncle on my mother's side, Billy McLeod, he phoned Mum one afternoon shortly after we'd settled in Margate and said, "Oh, how's the boy getting on?" And Mum said, "Oh, he's happy down here. By the way, he's playing in the school band." And Billy said, "Well, is he any good, Ed?" And Mum said, "Well, everyone's saying he's really talented." And I'm thinking about sending him to Brisbane to have proper tuition. Billy said, "Oh, well, that's a good idea, Edna, but it's a complete waste of time unless the boy has a kit of drums he can come home to and play." And Mum said, "Well, there's no way, Billy, that we can afford a kit of drums." They were really expensive at the time. Just a basic kit of drums, good quality. In my case, that they turned out to be Premier drums, but that's with just two tom-toms, one cymbal on the tom-tom, snare drum and a hi-hat. In today's terms, that would run you into about $15,000. Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah.
So they were a very expensive item. And Billy said, "Look, I'll buy a kit of drums. We'll just get his teacher to tell us what to buy. But I'll only do this on one condition, that if in 6 months' time he's not showing that he's really committed to this, I'll just drive up from Brisbane and pick up the drums and sell them." I went down to Brisbane and started having lessons, and I got really involved in it. I kept hold of the kit of drums, and I started to play in big jazz bands. And this is just before rock and roll. And these big jazz bands and visiting American players really drew in the crowds. What an honor it was for me as a little kid to be getting up and playing with these seasoned jazz players and being accepted. And that was the wonderful thing about it for me. And I love being on stage. I got over my stage jitters pretty quickly. And I've had a very fortunate time in my life, and I had the freedom to do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned that like those early performances you gave, and I reckon like that in playing with those jazz bands and getting used to being on stage, being in front of people, really came in handy when you got into acting.
It all began with a film called Smiley. It was big news for a movie to be made in Australia at that time. They were only made maybe a feature movie every 3 years or something like that. There was lots of publicity, and the director came out from England and held these auditions all around the country. I remember Mum coming in with a morning paper. We were in Margate, and she puts it on the table and she said, "Now, Colin, I've had a glance through this. You have to look at the front page." So she passes me the newspaper, and I read this article about this film company looking for this young scallywag sort of Tom Sawyer type boy. And she said exactly what you were getting at there. She said, "You've been getting up in front of these audiences and enjoying it and communicating with your music. Now, in this instance, you'll be communicating with your audience, but they won't be there. They will be the camera. And this time round, you'll be communicating with words and not music. And I've got every faith in you. You can pull this off." So we subsequently went down to the auditions, and I got the role. 3 years there, I was involved in film, and I've worked alongside many talented people. Sir Ralph Richardson, of course, Chips Rafferty, and then Richard Attenborough later on in my second movie, The Scamp, and Max Bygraves in my final movie. That was 58. I finished, and I'd had my 3 years there. And my mother decided that although we did have another offer, I think she thought that it was disrupting the family, which it was, because Mum and I would set off on our adventure and leave my sister and father behind and do the film and all that, live that life. And in her words, "Colin, if you've got the desire and the interest in it, you can always have another go at this later on in life." So that's how that came as a hell of a shock.
I can imagine.
Because yes, exactly. Because it's just a wonderful feeling to be part of something creative when it comes off.
Yeah, and of course, by the time you've made your third and last film, that you're going 12, going on 13. It's 1958, What kind of like music did you listen to going into your teenage years? Because I mean, we're talking like going into the 60s now. Like, yeah,
the record of that period, I lived jazz, and I had a little wind-up gramophone next to my drum kit because my drum teacher said, "You've got to do all these rudiments, Colin. You've got to learn your paradiddles and all that sort of thing. And I'll check you all the time on it. But the whole point of this is to play with other players. And the best thing that you can do is play along to a record." But I think what came out of that was that I was always sort of song orientated. From that transition from jazz to rock and roll, I never, ever forget. I remember where I was standing. Great records do this, don't they? I remember where I was standing in my grandmother's kitchen in New Farm in Brisbane, and on the radio came Little Richard, "Rip It Up." And that was the first time I heard a bit of music, and I thought, bloody hell, the power of it,
Yeah.
And he's a hero. Jerry D. Lewis had real impact as well. I was never a big fan of Elvis, to tell you the truth, but I think it's Little Richard that turned me on to the next wave, the rock and roll thing. I had a great friend up in Ipswich Grammar School who was a very talented songwriter, singer, guitar player. Carl Grossman was his name. And Carl and I, that was the core of the band that we were about to put together in Brisbane called Steve and the Board. Stevie Kipner was the lead singer. He was a classmate at art school. Lots of bands come out of art school. So we formed a band. I was going to art school, and then finally we decided to make the big move down to Sydney. I connected with the Gibb brothers while I was working with my band, and that led on to me joining the Bee Gees and opening up that whole new chapter.
Do you remember the first time you recorded with the Bee Gees?
Oh, I do. I remember so much stuff. They arrived on the ship, very limited money-wise. I reckon that they could have survived maybe 2 or 3 months if nothing really happened, and they would have had to go back home with their tails between their legs. I had very limited time as well, and so they arrived. I think I met them at a station in London. I didn't go out to the ship, no. I met them at a station, and there's quite a big crew of them. They had 3 brothers, of course. Now, it was Andy with them, perhaps, Mum and Dad, and we stood around my little bedsit in Hampstead. Grotty little place, wonderful suburb, right? So, and it was there and then that they said, look, are you going to get your foot in the door with the acting? And there was some possibility of a possible movie, possibly by the end of this year, and I couldn't afford to wait for the big wheel to turn sort of thing. And so they said, remember when you left, we talked about you joining the band, and you said, I want to give the film thing a go. And I said, yeah, I remember all that. And they said, well, do you want to join the band? And I said, I didn't hesitate. I said, yes. I always had so much faith in them because of the uniqueness of it. That's what it was. It was like Barry was a great singer. Robin was just, Robin Gibb, that voice was so unique. But you put the blend of those 3 voices together. There's been lots of other harmony successes, of course, but there's a particular sound there and it grabs you straight away. And the next time you hear that sound, you think, oh, that's the Bee Gees. It's got a uniqueness about it. So I had that faith in them, and it happened for us very quickly, actually. We took on a manager, Robert Stigwood. He got us in the studio within 2 weeks, something like that. We took on a 5th member, Vince Maloney, who played with Billy Thorpe, and we'd recorded the album. We were pretty quick, and we were working without an orchestra there, and then we went on a tour around the country and whatever, and then our first record, New York Mining Disaster, broke into the charts, and then during that year, we scored another, well, not quite top 10, top 20 with To Love Somebody, but it was the tail end of 67 that we came up, or Gibbs came up with, we came up with Massachusetts. And that was the turning point for the band. It was just absolutely huge. And so that really put us on a completely different level. From there on in, well, what can I say? It was a great adventure.
Definitely. And I mean, you mentioned New York Mining Disaster there, and I've read that it was written when there was a power cut at Polydor Records. Do you remember the writing of that song?
I remember it so clearly. Vince had yet to join the band, and we were in this grotty little demo room, and it had been thrown together in the basement of Polydor Records. And they were just sort of trying to sort it out. And there were these power outages most nights. So we ended up arming ourselves with a couple of torches. And then this one night, power went out, predictably, and Barry picks up a torch and says, okay, guys, let's head to the stairwell. So we go out of the studio, and there's a stairwell, concrete, with a lift in the middle of it, one of those cage lifts, I remember. And we're all sitting together on the steps, and the torch is there, whether it's being held or propped up, doesn't matter. And this is the wonderful thing that I was privy to with the Gibbs. And time again, I'd witnessed this. they'd sit down with, often they came into the studio with nothing. And we had the luxury of sort of end studio time. That's why those records sound so spontaneous, I think. So we're all sitting there in the dark. And then the conversation between the three of them starts, gee, it'd be scary if you're in the dark and you didn't know whether you'd escape from this situation or whether your loved ones are worrying about you, all those sort of questions. And then another one of them said, this is mainly Robin and Barry. Morris didn't involve himself in the lyrics all that much at all. So this is a conversation between Robin and Barry. And they get from this sort of being in the dark in a scary situation and then concluding a minor, that could happen to a minor, and then the words are coming out of the minor trapped there. And like they wrote that in 25 minutes or something like that. And it's a really fascinating situation to be in, to watch people that are pretty much on the top of their game going through their process. Wonderful imaginations and a great gift for melody, like that, the melodic content of all that Bee Gees stuff, not only when I was with them, but afterwards. Barry, I think, more than the others, had this gift of haunting little melodies, and it was such a privilege to be involved with such talent.
Yeah, and look, you mentioned their melodic, greatness, and
yeah,
and I think on that song too, New York Mining Disaster, I think not only is it melodically great, but the lyrics, I think there's a sense of for me, there's a sense of mystery to the lyrics, and it invokes something within the listener. I mean, do you think that was a part of their success as well, the lyrical content?
Barry joked. I remember, I was with him 3 years. I vaguely remember we were in America and he's talking with some journalist or whatever, and the journalist went into this, what do these lyrics from this song mean, and that song, whatever. And Barry replied very candidly. He said, I don't know. They don't mean anything. What do you reckon they mean? So they had this sort of feeling that if something is ambiguous, I think that's the word, yeah, it makes people think about the song. And they created such great imagery with their writing, I think. And that was sucked people in. Like New York mining disaster. Hey, what's this about? And also both Barry and Robin, the sound of words was very important to them. If they loved the sound of a particular word, it wouldn't really matter if it only vaguely would fit into the song or whatever. Not in a literal sense at all, but certain words have a sound about them, don't they? And they were very aware of that.
When you guys went in to make that record, like it sounds very psychedelic. Like as a package, the whole album, Bee Gees First, has a very psychedelic kind of feel to it. Like, did you guys go in?
Well, that's what was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys go in with the mindset of like this is the kind of what we want to do, what we want to achieve, is like sonically?
No, we just wanted to fit in with the scene, so to speak. And that make music that was reflective of what was going on around us. You've got to remember that the Bee Gees were huge Beatle fans. So if you listen to that album, there's a couple of tracks there that really, to my ear, get a little bit too close to the Beatles, right? One particular track is a song called "It's Just Like Taxman."
Yeah, I know the one. I can't think of the name though.
It wasn't In My Own Time, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah. The rhythmic pattern and the little guitar riff is just like Taxman, and we got a bit of flack from that, but like the Beatles were a great inspiration. I remember going away on a couple of days break with our then producer, Ozzy Byrne from Australia, and Morris. And we went to this little place in the country and we went out horse riding. did stuff like that for a couple of days just to get away from the studio, and then we went straight back in. But I remember hearing Strawberry Fields on the radio. Strawberry Fields was a double A side. It had Strawberry Fields on one side and Penny Lane on the other. But Strawberry Fields, Ringo introduced something I'd never heard before. And they were these sort of, it's not a fill because a fill comes between things. It's sort of like a lead-up introduction, right? He goes into the first verse and he comes up with these little patterns that just throw off statements. And then there's a gap, and then another little da-da-da, da-da-da, and then a gap, and then it'll come into that section. And I'd never heard that approach before, and I absolutely loved it. And so, obviously, there was a bit of Ringo copying from me on the Bee Gees first, on Turn of the Century particularly, and Cucumber Castle. I think there's 2 tracks there, but they weren't beat for beat an actual, imitation, but the approach was there, and it worked for me. It's a great approach, but it was really original coming from Ringo at the time, because I'd never heard that. Goodness me, Sergeant Pepper. I don't know how many times we all sat around and listened to that, and Morris joked, "Well, we may as well bloody start again." Wonderful times.
When you guys were making these records, I mean, I can imagine you guys knew that you were creating something great, but at the time, when, like in 1967, did you think that, songs like To Love Somebody or, would go be, 50 years from now, people would be listening to it? Like, did you think that?
No, there'd be no way. It was, I don't know, Charlie Watts joked once in an interview that when he joined the Rolling Stones, he thought, this would be lucky if this lasts 3 weeks, and then I'll go on to another band or this and that, But no, you're quite right. And that happened to me as well with particularly my first film, Smiley. Now, when I did that movie, my experience of the film world was going to the matinees on the weekend, meeting up with your mates, blah, blah, blah. And during the week there, in those years, it was always 2 movies on the night showing, and they would change the program twice, and that would be 6 movies in the week. Now, when the weekend finished sort of thing, they just move on to other movies. Now, when I did that Smiley movie, I thought, I knew it was good, and I knew that I was pulling it off. But I thought, this will be shown on Friday, Saturday, something like that, and I'm pleased with what I did, and then it'll be forgotten. There would be no way would I, if someone said to me at the time, this character that you're creating here is going to be remembered when you're 75 years old, I would have looked at them like they're lunatics. And it was the same with the Gibbs. We knew what we were doing was interesting, unique, but it was always chasing your next single. But that thought of this being remembered decades on wouldn't have come into our heads.
Yeah, and I mean, and it seems like as well, like the Gibb brothers were writing pretty quickly, because as soon as Bee Gees first came out in, I think, July 14th, 1967, you guys were back in the studio July 17th, 1967 to make the next record. I mean...
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, like, they were pretty fast writers at that point in their career.
Well, they were. They discarded a lot of things along the way. They would start working on a song, and if it really wasn't clicking, within about, I don't know, 6 lines or something like that, and into maybe the first verse, or they couldn't quite work out how to construct it to move on to the chorus or a bridge or something like that, wouldn't hesitate. They just drop it and say, well, let's try something else. So what I'm getting at here is that for every song that they were happy with, I reckon there'd be 4 songs along the way in that process that they weren't, and they just weren't recorded. They weren't, just not up to their standard.
But
they wouldn't persevere on something that they really thought wasn't working.
Okay.
It would, it was always very, they sit around the studio. Sometimes nothing had happened in an hour. And then suddenly Morris would come up with a little chord sequence and there were the odds there that it could really work. And then when it worked, it was just amazing to watch the speed and the creativity of it all. But, look, Barry was studying songwriting when he was 12 years old. Now, what I mean by studying, I remember times we drove around in limousines a lot, as you can imagine. And there was always an acoustic guitar in the car. And I remember times we'd be sitting in the back of the limousine and the discussion would come to what was about to get into the top 40 or 20 or whatever. And, what do we all think about this particular record? Usual muso stuff. We lived it. And say I'd happen to mention some record that had just broken in the charts and was starting to get a lot of airplay and stuff like that. And Barry picked up the bloody guitar and I'd only heard it last week and he'd sing me the song. Yeah. I'm not saying every exact line of the lyric, but he was so wired in to what a hit song was all about. He was a student of it.
Yeah.
And so I just honestly, he'd hear a record once or something like that, and if it was brought up in conversation later on, he'd just sing you the song, and he'd only heard it once. It's absolutely amazing.
It absolutely sounds like it, definitely. And I mean, you mentioned there like how they discarded a lot of songs that that wasn't working.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, like, when you guys were kind of writing and recording Massachusetts, I mean, did that song come pretty easily? Was it kind of just one of those ones that just happened?
Well, you've got to remember my role here, right? I think actually that I was a perfect drummer for them at that point of time because I was very sensitive to the songs. I saw my role firstly picking the exact right tempo. Tempos are really important in records. And also just creating the mood and with the lyrics thinking, that word would be nice to give a little attention to that word through my playing, a little accent here or something like that. But Massachusetts, I remember, we were in New York, first time round in America, just doing promotional work. And it was part of we were there 6 weeks doing this stuff. We're in New York. We're about to fly out to Los Angeles like the break of dawn. But Morris wants to go out and party before we leave New York. And Vince is up for it, so am I, and Dick Ashby, our roadie. But Robin and Barry say that we've got this idea for a song, and I think we'll stay back. You guys go out and have a good time, right? So we all arrived back. Could have been like 2 a.m, something like that. And Robin and Barry are still up, lounging back on this sort of brocade. These hotels were something else. Chandeliers and marble, and they're lounging back just with an acoustic guitar. And they sung us this song. And I thought, we've got to come up with something for our third single that's danceable. That I had this in my head because it was, ballad. But I thought, it's a lovely tune. And they always were, we get back to that melodic aspect of it. Then I didn't give it any thought. And then when we got back to London, there was no sort of idleness with us. And we're in the studio within 2 or 3 days, and this song comes up, and we put down the backtrack, just guide vocals, sort of vocals that you can tidy up later on if you want, sort of thing, and a couple of guitars, bass and drums. And I thought, gee, that's a lovely feel, it's there and it's really relaxed. And then, as usually happened, we'd put down maybe 3 backtracks that we were happy with. And then the orchestra would be booked to come in and do their overdub on 3 tracks to get the most, out of them for that 3-hour session. And it was when I heard the introduction to Massachusetts, which was the song that was written by Bill Shepherd, who by that time was our full-time musical director, a much underrated figure in the history of the Bee Gees, I must say. And I thought that is the most gorgeous introduction. It's just so sweet. And I thought, my God, this could be a real big hit record for us. Let's hope. And that was the one, as I said earlier, that cracked it for us, Massachusetts. But if you listen to that track today, you'll appreciate what I'm on about. It's the melodical content. It's a beautiful arrangement. I think Barry said at one time, that's the best arrangement that Bill Shepherd ever did for us. And I'd agree with him with that. I think it was absolute genius. There you go, Massachusetts. Of all the stuff I recorded with them, Massachusetts, and it's not just that it was such a big record, I've got a real fondness for Massachusetts because I remember where we were excited that we could grow into one of the leading bands. But it was Massachusetts and the success of that record that gave us this feeling, bloody hell, we've arrived. Right? We've arrived. And there was a concert around that time, I remember, our first concert with an orchestra at the Savile Theatre in London. And we did 2 shows a day there for a couple of days or something. And in between shows, we all went back to the dressing room and the Gibbs are poking their head out the window and all the fans are screaming in the street below sort of thing, right? Then the Gibbs are saying, come on, guys, take your turn. And so Vince and I go over to the window and we stick our heads out. It's not like Buckingham Palace. There's no, what do you call it, a balcony or anything, right? Yeah. Just out the window, big wave. And this is probably one of the most touching moments. There's about 500-600 kids out there, mainly girls. That was our audience in England. And they just suddenly burst into Waltzing Matilda.
Yeah.
When they saw Vince and I. And I turned to Vince and he's got a tear rolling down his cheek. Like by this time the fans knew the Bee Gee background. And it was such a tribute, because Vince and I were homegrown Aussies in this band that all these fans decided to dedicate the Waltzing Matilda to us.
Yeah, and look, you mentioned with the song there, you mentioned the tour of the US, and I know that you guys got to go play on the Ed Sullivan Show. I mean, how was that for you? Like being on such a what is now a legendary music show.
Ah, goodness me. Well, of course you knew that, and you knew the importance of it. But he was a strange character. He was standoffish. He wasn't the sort of man, that, hey, I hear you're from Australia, what's it like out there, or any of that sort of stuff. It was all very focused with him and whatever. Oh, of course, we are hoping that this would really break us into America. We had a lot of success in America. I think we had a couple of top 5 records. During the time I was with the band, we'd never had a number 1 there. And we didn't play live there too many times. In fact, I think we only played, our first gig was Anaheim Convention Center in LA. And then we went home and we might have done some TV and then went home. And then we came out later and we did a show at Forest Hills Stadium in New York Now that's like a tennis stadium, but there's a big sort of amphitheatre. It was a pretty big crowd. I can't remember exactly the numbers, certainly over 10,000. And that went off really well. And then traveling across America, we did the Ohio State Fair. And then we were supposed to do the Hollywood Bowl, and that fell over. And then we went back to New York, we'd done Forest, and started recording the final album. But what I'm getting at here, we never did like the hard slog through America, like, for instance, our stablemates with Robert Stigwood. The Cream did. The Cream got this strategy that they would start in New York, and they would be happy to play to like they were huge stars in England by this time, but they'd be happy to play to like 300 or 400 people. And, the business side of it sorted this out, and they started from New York, and the crowds just built and built and built. By the time they got to LA, like about 2 months later, there were queues down the street to go and see them play. So they did it through hard slog and word of mouth. For some reason, Stigwood didn't want to take that track. He sort of thought fewer gigs and more prestigious, and we'll have the big orchestra, and it's a real big deal and all that sort of stuff. But as it turns out, I think we could have taken a slower approach in America. We could have gone out, with like a string quartet, for God's sake, playing colleges, or I don't know. It's all history now. But we never reached that sort of next stage of stardom in America that we did in England, and certainly not Germany, which was our biggest market. The crowds were just crazy in Germany.
I've read that for the Bee Gees album Idea that you wrote a song with Morris Gibb, and I think it's still unreleased, but it's called Everything That Came from Mother Goose. And
right, that was the song. Right,
yeah.
Then I started off on a Christmas visit back to Australia, and I met up with Cole Grossman, and maybe I took some demos back, and Morris might have had a bit of a hand in it. Goodness me, what on earth was that like?
Did it ever? Did they ever? Think...
I've never heard it. No.
Oh, okay. So, because I was going to ask you then, are the master tapes still out there? The demo tapes still out there, or like?
I reckon. I can't imagine us approaching that as a seriously. Oh, this could be a Bee Gees track or whatever. I think that Morris and I were very, very close, and as mates, and also with music. I've spoken about Barry, his recollection and his understanding of the structure and what it took for a hit record and to get that hook, all that stuff. He understood all that. But stepping away from working, Morris was the most eclectic one of them. And I always have been as well. And so Morris and I'd spend all night sometimes listening to Dixieland jazz, or hey, how about that, And we just phone up the record company and we'd have something to play it on in the hotel. You've got people at your beck and call in that situation. So I remember once in New York, and I said, but recently heard some bluegrass, and it's great, Morris. Okay, so, within no time at all these bluegrass records are delivered to us at the hotel, and I remember spending a whole afternoon with Morris listening to all this bluegrass stuff, which was so devoid from what we were doing, but Morris had that real interest in all sorts of types of music. I remember once dragging Robin off to a concert while we were in Germany.
Yeah.
Because I still had that interest in jazz of Oscar Petersen, like wonderful pianist, right? Robin was bored shitless, to tell you the truth. That's the only way I can put it. He just could not get into it at all. And looking back, I'm really grateful that I had that openness, that I was interested. That's not to say you like everything, but at least be interested in it and you know, try to understand where it's coming from. Now, I'm very grateful, looking overall at my life, that I've had that interest, that couple of interests there. Firstly, art, and I've carried that on. I can't go into any of these towns that we're touring without searching out the art gallery and having a look around. You know, it's just part of me, and I'm so grateful for that. And the music has lingered on as well. I'm having a good time, I tell you. The band that I'm with, Best of the Bee Gees, they're really good players. They really are. And I'm so critical. I really am. I just can't help it. My God, this gets close to the Gibbs. And that's not just like, that voice sounds a bit like Robin or like this. If I close my eyes sometimes, especially with Russell singing the Robin Gibb songs like Massachusetts, you close your eyes, and to me, and I was part of it, for a moment there, I'm just back there. I really am. You know, they just they capture the mood of the songs. They're wonderful players. It's a very professional show. And I was reluctant at first, you know, but I'm having a great time being part of it. And they're all such lovely guys to mix with. And I'm out there seeing, you know, towns all around Australia that I'd never seen before. And it'll be interesting as the year goes by when we pick up an orchestra for the first time, not this weekend, the following weekend in Toowoomba. And then we're carrying an orchestra for about 10 gigs or something like that. So it's not on the scale like it got out of hand when I was with the Bee Gees. We finished up with 50-piece orchestras, and it was rubbish, really, you know. It was all show, that part of it. But it's a 20-odd piece, you know, string section, and there's something about live strings and a live orchestra. It's got a sort of power to it. It really has. I'm really looking forward to sort of experiencing that again. Yeah. So interesting, isn't it, that this is all cropped up in my life now, you know, after all these years.
For any promoters that might be listening, are you taking on new gigs? I know you've got a few already booked in here, but would you take on more gigs if promoters wanted to book you guys?
Oh, of course. Of course, we want to work as much as we can. You know, we're into it. The enthusiasm, we're overflowing with enthusiasm. Usually by this time in the year, it's sort of set for us, you know.
Yep.
And there's this run. I don't know. It's about 10 different gigs with an orchestra. And we've got dates set. I haven't got them in front of me for next year already, and hopefully, and it looks positive, that we're certainly going to New Zealand this year, and next year we'd like to branch out into Southeast Asia and Japan, and there's no reason why we can't take this all around the world, and I'm just really proud to be part of it.
Well, Colin, it was an honour to be able to talk to you today. I mean, we spoke about such great things, and yeah, just thank you so much for making the time.
Oh, you're so welcome, and it's lovely to talk to someone who's done their homework as well. You know, it's great to hear your enthusiasm, and it was lovely chatting with you.
That was drummer of the Bee Gees, Colin Petersen. If you'd like to check out Colin's work with the Best of the Bee Gees, you can head to bestofthebeegees.com.au. Remember to share this episode with other music fans. And if you really enjoyed this edition, we'd love it if you leave a review. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Vinyl Vibes. And to all those music lovers out there, you stay groovy.